This interesting tension right now between a need to get ready for something and be ready to turn on a dime, and then this unease in the market, in our organizations. It just feels like everything that we're doing is getting ready for something, and we don't necessarily know what that something is. Organizations have been holding their breath since January, and we've seen all kinds of conflicting market indicators about, is the economy good? Is it not good? It feels different depending on where you sit in an organization, whether you're a gig worker or whether you're a full-time employee. Large organizations versus small organizations versus public sector organizations are experiencing this very differently.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for a very special episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you. And then we talk about what you might do about them. So I've got two very special guests with me today. Joining me is Marc Moschetto. Marc's the CEO and founder of KickMotor. Hi, Marc.
Hey, how you doing?
And my partner, Susan Richards, who you guys know, she's the founder of Sapient Insights Group. Welcome, Susan.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So this, I think, is going to be a great show. I love doing specials. There's a lot going on in HR, and we talk about these things all the time as we do a lot of work with Marc, and he helps us with our messaging and marketing. And as we continue to talk about some of the challenges that are going on in the world right now, we thought, hey, let's talk about this with everybody else. Let's bring some other people into the fold here. So there's just a lot of tech. There's AI layered on top of that, integration, data governance. And then on top of all of that, there's all this stuff that's going on in the world right now. We just had an election in the US. And while we might be discussing some of its impact on us on this show, we have no idea right now who our next president is. And we actually may not know on November 7th when we have this conversation. There's that, there's wars, there's some major conflicts abroad, dangerous and life-threatening weather, economic challenges. I was really hoping we could just talk about how some of these things, among other things, regardless of your point of view, impact us as organizations, they impact our people, and by virtue of our roles, they impact HR. So does that sound like a good plan to you guys?
Yeah, let's do this.
How much time do we have to cover this? It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we can go as long as we want. It's my show. I do what I want, right?
Yes.
Eric Cartman.
I love it when she's in charge.
Well, that is the plan, and let's get into the huddle. So the last few years, obviously since COVID, and in particular the last 18 months, I think we've been on quite a ride. And there's so many things we talk about in our, daily lives, in our social circles, maybe at work, but the reality is the same things that are impacting our personal life are also impacting our work life. There's no doubt. Marc, what are some of the challenges you see a lot of companies grappling with right now? Just, things that are impacting the work, not just their ability to do their jobs and deliver the products and services that they deliver, but just the ability to run a business right now.
Yeah, a lot of the things that I'm seeing out there is it just feels generally stuck. I wish I had a more technical, fancy, buzzy word for it, but all the things that you mentioned, right? All the challenges that are going on in the world, all the challenges that are going on in the workplace, all the change that's being driven. I think there's a recognition of an acute need to do things differently, right? To understand that everything that we've kind of done in the past has been in the past. AI in and of itself can be a game changer, and all kind of the ethical considerations around that. So there's at once this need to move forward, and on the other side of the coin, there's this like we don't know what's going to go on with the economy. We don't have a really solid idea of where things are going to go based on the recent elections, and it just feels like there's a little bit of a holding pattern in a lot of organizations. I think the ones that are really going to, make a difference and are making a difference today are the ones that are kind of recognizing that there's when everyone else is kind of taking a breather, that's a great opportunity to kind of surge ahead. But it's a tough place to be when you're kind of looking at the balance sheet. Maybe things are looking a little differently than years past, and it's a tightrope walk. And then you've got the workforce on the other side of it too. Like everyone is just on edge. We're so polarized culturally that there's again that tightrope walk between how do we create an environment that is at once kind of everyone has a voice and everyone feels welcome, but we also know that sometimes conflicting viewpoints can bring some really strong reactions from others. So yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of plates spinning right now, and I think a lot of organizations are just looking for guidance on how they take those next steps, and what does the next step after that look like.
Yeah. Susan, what about you? I mean, as a founder and somebody who runs a small business, we're feeling it
every day. Every day. Yeah. So there's this interesting tension right now between a need to like get ready for something and be ready to turn on a dime. And then this like this unease in the market, in our organizations. It just feels like everything that we're doing is getting ready for something, and we don't necessarily know what that something is. Organizations have been holding their breath since January, and we've seen all kinds of conflicting market indicators about is the economy good? Is it not good? It feels different depending on where you sit in an organization, whether you're a gig worker or whether you're a full-time employee. Large organizations versus small organizations versus public sector organizations are experiencing this very differently. And it feels like we don't have a real clear roadmap of where to go and what to do next. And all of that leads to, a sense of ambiguity and unknowing. So we don't know exactly what to do. And it, I'm seeing it show up in organizations in different ways. You've got organizations who are kind of taking the bull by the horns and say, we're going to continue to march forward and act as if we're coming out on the other side of whatever this thing is that we're in right now, and making plans for 2025 and using what they know from past experiences to drive their future decisions. And then you've got organizations who are really stuck. Marc, I like that word that you use, because I see that in action every single day. Oh, we can't make that decision yet. We're in the budget season, or we're in open enrollment season, or we were in vacation season, and using whatever I'm going to be really frank here, whatever the excuse of the day is, to just say we can't make that decision. And those organizations, I think, are going to really struggle in the coming months and year. So I think it depends on where you sit and what your perspective is to how you're experiencing this roller coaster that we're on right now. I've seen it from a lot of different perspectives. And as a business owner, I am holding on for dear life and ready to see whatever is over that next hill.
Yeah, it's impacting everybody, though. And I think, you think about the leadership and the C-suite and the people making decisions about how it's impacting their business overall. But they also need to be looking at how it's impacting their people. And this is that time of year where you start seeing, it's rift time, right? Let's reduce our workforce. It happens every year right before the holidays. I'll be curious to see how big it is this year, but just based on how the rest of the year has been, I wouldn't be surprised if it's pretty large. And I don't know, how much organizations are thinking about that whole ripple effect. Obviously, we have to sell product and services. I mean, we have to make money to even run a business. But at the same time, these are people that are being impacted by the same things we as an organization are being impacted by, and it's impacting their work life, their home life, everything. And, are you seeing organizations or HR people in particular paying acute attention to this right now, or thinking about better ways to solve for this, or at least to keep people engaged in during this time? Marc, your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think, when you think about the workforce, and you mentioned how much it just impacts people, and work from home certainly blurred that kind of work-life line even more. If there ever was a balance before, it's kind of thrown out now. But, you look at things like social media, for example, and there's this new phenomenon of workers that are starting to like record and post on TikTok their riff Zoom calls with their
Yes.
bosses. And it's remarkable how consistent every freaking conversation is that goes down, right? Like, we're moving in a different direction, your role's been eliminated, and it's this very kind of cut and dry, here's a curt message from your manager, here's a slightly less curt message from HR with your documents and your severance if you're lucky enough to have it, and then, make sure you send your laptop back. And I think that is kind of amplifying the sensitivity, or the heightened sense of the shoe is going to drop amongst workers, especially the generations that spend a lot of time on social media, seeing that aspect. And I think it makes those folks who are in HR, it makes your job that much harder, first of all, because these sorts of things are never easy. I mean, I've been a CMO at a couple of different organizations, and have led teams for longer than that. And if you ever, as a leader, get to the point where those types of conversations are comfortable, and you don't lose sleep at night, I think that's a real time for introspection. They're never easy, but I think in today's world, where people expect maybe a little more candor, a little more openness, a little more kind of detail, as we think about all the changes that we need to do, specifically around layoffs and stuff like that, boy, I would love to see people taking a little bit of a different approach in, just maybe being more open and honest with the workforce as they have those conversations. And I understand you've got to protect the company, and you've got to make sure that you're saying, coloring within the lines of labor law and things like that. But I think one way that organizations can start to kind of come out and build that faith and confidence as they get ready to take that next hill is to just have a little bit more authenticity and a little more candor around tough conversations like that, or maybe even have those tough conversations before, move as drastic as riffs and things like that come up. And then, you're going to get more engagement if people feel like they're more integrally a part of the workforce than this kind of commodity that can be, that can be riffed without much notice. Boy, I really sunk into dark territory there. I apologize. I'll lighten up in a minute. I promise.
Susan, bring us back to the light.
Yeah. So Marc, as you were talking, the word formulaic came to mind, and HR organizations, for the last 50 years, or however, at least as long as I've been part of the workforce, have been very formulaic about the way we treat our employees, our staff, our talent. And as you were talking about, the words that we use when it's time for a downsizing or RIF, change, restructuring, mergers, acquisition, it's formulaic, and we get the script from the consultants or from HR or whoever is guiding us down this path. And I am craving more humanity in this process. And I believe that organizations and let's like get rid of the word organizations. Let's just talk about people, leaders of people, managers of people, our frontline staff. If we go ahead and take that mind shift of getting out of the formulas and into just being humans, we're going to do much better. And that also brings up the kind of the thought around transparency and getting real with people. We see it every day because we're a small business, and so our staffs know, they know where we are. We're really transparent with them about how well we're doing or how well we're not doing and what we need to improve our position. I think if more leaders could just get real with their teams and step away from the fear of not saying the right thing or saying the wrong thing or looking vulnerable or maybe not having all the answers. If we could just say, look, we're people just like everybody else. Yeah, I have a different title. I've been doing this a little longer than my frontline folks have. But at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all like go home to our families and we pet our dogs, and we have a lot more in common than we probably give ourselves credit for. So I'd like to see us get to a point where we can start to have those authentic conversations with our peers, our staff, ourselves, throughout our organizations, because social media is one life or one slice of life. But those of us who work from home every day and our colleagues, our clients see our homes, see our everyday life. I think there's just a different expectation now. And I'd like to see HR and leaders in organizations kind of catch up with that and say, let's just be people again.
I think this is, Susan, where that skill of change leadership is really starting to become so critical in an organization. I mean, if you want to be a leader in your organization, you need to understand how to navigate change in the organization. And this is a great example. I don't think most organizations think about or even plan for the change management around a reduction in force or any sort of, they think about it in terms of bigger projects, like we just implemented a new technology or we're going through an org transformation or something really big like that. But there's things happening every day that are considered change. And I just feel like that's such a critical skill these days that people have got to take on, right? So that they can help organizations navigate that road.
Absolutely. Change leadership it sounds really fancy, but it's basics. It is building relationships. It is creating connections with the people around you, whoever those people are. It is communicating and not, not the communications program, but really talking to people and listening. Listening actively, listening in a way that is not to respond, but to understand. And then it's collaborating. So, bringing people into the fold, breaking down those silos, working across functions and sometimes working across, we have, initiatives that happen in our companies all the time where we're collaborating with people who don't even work for us. So it's collaborating with our clients, collaborating with our vendor partners, collaborating with our staff, and we can learn as much from someone who hasn't been with us for 10 years as we can from somebody who's been with us since our company started. So the change leadership skill set is, again, it sounds fancy, but when you strip all of the consulting words away from it, it really is about figuring out who's important, what's the impact that an event is going to have, and then who is going to be impacted by that. And instead of thinking of change in a programmatic perspective, thinking about it as an everyday thing. When I get up in the morning, things are not going to go the way that I have them planned out in my head. And I've got to be adaptable, and I've got to be agile, and I've got to be flexible. And all of those skills go into helping you be a more skilled and a better leader, and really leading that change that's going to happen day to day, month to month, year to year, or on a programmatic perspective.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, when I wake up in the morning, I think about who are the 2 or 3 people that I need to have a conversation with today. And it may not be people that I have on my calendar. It's just somebody who I've got to move the conversation. I've got to move some change. And so if I need to talk to these 2 or 3 people just so that they understand what's happening or get a message from me or whatever it is. I feel like it's a component, right? It's part of that skill set of thinking about not just the meetings I have on my schedule, but where do I need to step in?
Yeah, you're describing being intentional, and that's another component of change leadership, is being very intentional about what we're doing and paying attention to the impact that we have on those around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, and another component of that is empathy, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I love most about the way things are evolving now is those concepts of intentionality and empathy. They're not soft skills anymore. Like they're necessary skills, right?
These are
And I
business
think,
critical.
right, I mean, it goes so hand in hand with everything that you were talking about, Susan, and to, well, we'll go back to the light now, Teri. So when you talk about organizations that are going through just these amazing explosive growth periods, I've been so blessed to be part of a couple of organizations that went through that. And like, it felt like every couple of quarters we were taking a new mountain, and the team was growing and the company was growing. And that's chaotic. And that can be just as confusing as when the opposite happens. And, if you're leading with empathy, if you're leading with intentionality, if you're leading with transparency and having discussions with your growing teams and say, hey guys, here's what we got coming up on the horizon. Man, is this exciting? I need your help. I'm not quite sure. I know I'm supposed to be leading this team, but like, I need your input. I don't know how I'm going to get there. But the type of vulnerability always paid so many more dividends for me than the times I walked into the room and I'm like, guys, here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. Right. Like when you co-author a plan with the people around you and then you execute it together, you have the agility is built in, right? Because you're kind of reacting in real time to what's going on, and everyone's part of the equation going forward. And you can have that. I think it takes a lot of the weight off of well, we started going down this road and like it was okay, but not quite knocking it out of the park. So what if we turn it 20 degrees and try it this way? Like
Yeah.
when I think about the best leaders that I've had an opportunity to work with, and I tried to emulate and probably fall short on a regular basis, it's the folks that have that openness and that understanding, and that extends down to teams too, right? Like I've had folks that I've managed that I was ready to kind of bump them up and put another team under them so they can spread their mojo, and they're like, look, I love being an individual contributor. Like I don't want all that sort of stuff, and
Yeah.
being able to have the room in the organization that someone like that can stay in that role and still grow and still prosper and still take advantage of all the positive things without some of the other stuff that goes along with it. It's awesome. And, harkening back to something that you talked about, Susan, right? It gets rid of that formulaic approach to leadership and takes it more to a one-to-one level. And I think that if we can make that turn collectively, if we can help organizations to make that turn, like you've got a whole different ballgame in how your company grows and reacts to setbacks and headwinds, as well as like rocket ship growth opportunities. It's an
Yeah.
awesome thing to see in action, right?
Yeah, as you were talking there, Mark, I was thinking about the influence that we have on those around us, and creating buy-in for for whatever it is that we're trying to make happen. And when we use our influence as leaders, change leaders who are getting better every day, when we use our influence to understand what is it that my peer or my staff member or my colleague is interested in and what's in it for them, how do I influence them and gain buy-in from them? Not that I'm telling them this is what's happening and get on board or get off. It's how is this situation going to impact them, and what can I do to make them aware, to bring them along, and to get them to a point where they're not just accepting, but maybe even a little excited. And maybe my plan for how that person was going to buy in is not what really happens. So back to your point of somebody that you thought was going to be a fabulous leader of people, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to be an individual contributor. Knowing that is as important as building that team under them. So knowing what really motivates them and what they're really interested in, and then crafting your message, and not just crafting a message, but following through with actions that set that individual or that team or that organization up for the most success that they can possibly have. That's magic. And that happens in lots of places, in kind of in a individual situations, team situations, and organizational situations. It's happening more and more every day, and there's no reason that it has to stay as a secret. We want to share that with all of our clients and all of our colleagues.
I think the other thing is we can't underestimate, Mark, you talked about the rapid growth and expansion, and that's all great. And that really gets people energized. And, to the point where, some of the things that a leader's worried about is burnout, right? But on the flip side, when things are soft, I think we forget that this is also stressful for people, right? That I'm not sure I'm contributing to the level that I need to contribute because I don't have, maybe I don't have the same amount of work I had 6 months ago because things are soft, right? I'm feeling anxiety and I'm feeling stress, and I don't know how can I better contribute, right? I think we underestimate those periods. We're always in a state of flux. We're always in a state of some sort of change. And I think, we need to look to keep our pulse on that, right?
Yeah. And I think too, one of that's such a great point. One of the things that I always tried to do with my teams is that we know these times will come, right? Just by virtue of being a human being on planet Earth, you're going to bump into like boom times and bust times. And there's always like that eternal to-do list of things that like, wouldn't it be cool if ... but it doesn't quite make the cut when you're just running a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like always keep that list on warm idle. And, even if there were like just crazy busy times, making sure there was time carved out so you could get to those passion projects, or you could get to those like wacky ideas that you want to try. I mean, it's a great way to kind of fill some of the quiet space if you're hitting some doldrums and you're maybe not quite running at full tilt. And then, another part of it too is just having the realization that life happens, right? And I'm a Gen Xer, and I've gone through at that same company where we were just doing rocket ship growth. My dad's Alzheimer's was accelerating, and that was an incredibly stressful time for the family. I've got 3 kids, so you're kind of like the was it the cliche, we're the sandwich generation, right? We're taking care of folks and kids. When you have those opportunities where things get quiet, and you have, encourage your teams to spend some time with folks. Like all too often when we get into these busy environments, we'll carve out that time when it's something emergent or when it's something special, or, you kind of forget the day to day. So again, kind of leading with empathy and understanding the pulse of your team, creating those windows of opportunity for them to take advantage of some of those things too, can take the edge off a little bit, because, Lord knows things will ramp up again. And it's always great to make sure that people are, have that flexibility and they know that you're tuned in on it too.
Yeah. Susan, a lot of companies are diving in, like trying something new. Like this is not happening right now. So let's turn the corner. Let's do something different. Kind of like we did in 2020 when the pandemic was hitting. We decided to, acquire the HR system survey.
We went out and acquired a company or acquired part of a company.
Yeah, let's do that.
Started a whole new line of business. I think I kept saying to everybody, what's the worst thing that can happen? Maybe this doesn't work, but what if it does? And there were days when I was like, okay, I got to tell myself that just as much as I have to tell my new business partners and my team that this is something amazing and new. And this year has been an interesting year for consulting. We came off of just this banner year of fabulous growth and adding people to our team, and in 2024, some of that work evaporated. We usually see a slowdown in the summertime of an election year, and this year that slowdown happened in late December and early January. And we started to hear not just us, but other organizations were taking a pause. And so we took that opportunity to launch a new practice, leadership and culture and coaching, and also took that opportunity to build a change leadership cohort that will be presenting to the market in 2025. So, okay, in 2020, we started a new line of business. In 2024, we're starting a new line of business. And I think that having that foundation of being willing to go wherever the path leads us, and knowing that we've built a very strong foundation made it a lot easier for us to say yes to some of those passion projects that are now turning into core business elements for us.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things I love most about you all starting that up is that you might be ramping it up now, but I've known you all for years, right? Like Stacy and I go back a ways, and Teri and I used to work together at least a couple of whistle stops, right? These are things that you all have been doing for like years and years and years, right? Mm-hmm. Like these best practices and helping companies to make the turn and internalize these coaching best practices. And like I'm thrilled, just as someone who's been a fan of the business, to see you roll this out, because I've seen you do it for years. And it's so cool to be able to encapsulate it into these programs and help other folks get to it. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. Shameless plug, I know, but I had to throw it out there.
Thank you. Well, it's crazy to think that, people ask me, how long have you been doing change? I was like, well, I think I've been doing it my whole career without calling it that. We went through I'm a project manager, and I couldn't get people to spend the money on change. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll just incorporate change into project management and we'll put it in that budget. And then, we finally got people to realize that change was important, and putting some budget toward change leadership and change management would lead to better business outcomes. And our data supports that. We've been looking at that for over 10 years, and for 10 years consistently, we see a very strong correlation between the investment in change activities and business outcomes for projects and programs. And now evolving that into change leadership, so it's not just doing the day-to-day change work, but it's really, elevating the game for those individuals that are leading change, not just at a program level, but throughout their organization, and recognizing that that's a leadership capability that is not just a nice to have anymore, but with an average of 10 to 14 changes, major changes in every organization every year. It's a core critical skill. So, I think we're just growing along with our clients, and I absolutely love where we're taking it next.
Yeah, and change it's a squishy, like, to use another technical term, it's squishy, right? I mean, a lot of people don't instinctively, they understand what you're saying, but they don't know how to, how to manage it, how to, build programs around it. And I think that's where, we're looking at it and saying there is a way. It's not just training. It's not just, a project plan. It's much more specific than that, but it's also a lot of soft skills. It requires a lot of people, right? It's not just one person saying, I can execute this change because I, wrote some emails to the employees. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's also not something that has to be overwhelming for the kinds of work that people need to do. And
yeah. And if you embed it into everything that you're doing and you build change capability into the organization, it's not just me thinking about it or Teri thinking about it or Marc thinking about it. It's all three of us coming to our work or what we're doing with that perspective of what is going to be the impact of this change on me, on my team, on my organization. And is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? And what do I need to do about it? The practice of change, people do think it's squishy, but it doesn't have to be. It can be very, very tactical and specific. And it can be embedded into everything that you do.
yeah.
And I think too, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead, Marc.
No, I was just going to say, we mentioned something at the top of the call about like moving away from the formulaic, right? And being more kind of in the moment. And what I love about kind of leadership coaching and leadership, training and just preparing for change when it's done right, there's a big difference between a framework and a formula, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Being armed with, okay, here's how I approach this, the variables are going to change, but having some way of kind of getting your arms around it and rallying troops and understanding how to work with different people, that's anything but formulaic. But it's not some voodoo spell that only certain people are born with and like you're imbued with it or you're not. Like, you can learn it, and you can learn it in a way that's not just a mathematical equation, right?
Right. And if we think about it, I mean, human interaction with our colleagues, with our peers, we can make some assumptions and we can make some predictions about how they're going to react to a specific instance, but we can never know for sure. And with change, it's an individual activity. So a change that I'm really excited about today, I might not be excited about tomorrow because I got another piece of information about how that's going to impact me. So I need a lot of tools in my toolkit to be able to pick and choose what are the right tools to use at any given time. So it can be anything from creating a vision and knowing what the strategy is to being really tactical around crafting a communication or creating some sort of learning content to figuring out, is the job description going to change? Do I need new skills to be able to operate in this new world? And is that going to lead to some different compensation? And how do I measure the effectiveness of my work going forward? And how do I measure the effectiveness of this change or this program or this transformation or insert your favorite consulting word? And then what do I need to make sure happens after this project, quote unquote, goes live? And all of the consultants that we hired are off focusing on something else? Or what happens after, the team changes, so that we're operating in this new world, and how do we make sure that the change sticks, and that it's not just, hey, we'll do this until everybody stops paying attention to it, and then we'll go back to operating the way that we used to. So a framework that, our framework gives you the opportunity to pick and choose the right tool for the right time and the right situation.
Yeah.
And that's part of
I'm
the work.
laughing
It makes
because
it fun.
we see that every day, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have a tendency to fall back on our old patterns and old behaviors unless unless they really are very sticky.
Yeah.
Right. And it forces us to move to do something different. Great example. I decided I was going to work out in the mornings. So I started getting up every day early to do my workouts, because I normally work out in the evening. I mean, that lasted about 3 weeks. And then I was like, just something came up one morning where I couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden I just fell back into my old pattern, right? It was easy. Like that's what I normally do. It's like that with so many things that we do. I know no podcast would be complete if we didn't talk about AI, the magic words. Marc, is AI going to help us here? Is that something that we see that we think is going to help us with everything? Although I think a lot of us are still sort of waiting for the big ta-da. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has unlimited potential. I think it certainly has a role to play. There's no question about that. But I do think there's a couple things that we need to be mindful about. One is, as we're not entering a season, but we're in a point in time where people want more connection, right? We talk about working from home, and we talk about leading with empathy. We can't say those words and then say, here, we've got this killer chatbot. Like, if you're having a problem with your family, like, go to the chatbot first, because I can't be bothered. It doesn't scale.
Marc,
I get it.
what do you mean?
I know. Heresy. I know.
Come on. My HR people are screaming at this point. I thought it was going to solve everything.
I know. I'm sorry. But I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for AI to help and streamline and accelerate everything, but we just need to be sensitive about where we drop it in. And then the other piece of it, I just saw there was a new academic study that highlighted how AI models kind of take on some of the worldviews and the biases, intentional or unintentional, of the folks who are programming that AI. And it's just something we've got to be really careful that we safeguard around, right? Because the speed and scale that AI tools can work at, boy, you can do the wrong thing really fast across a really wide area if you don't have some guardrails around it, right? So I sound like a Luddite. Like, I hear myself talking about it. I'm like, this is not me. I'm the guy who, like, every year Apple's like, hey, we moved the on button from one side to another. I'm like, I need that. But when it comes to AI, like, I've got a lot more. I think I spent a lot of time watching, like, too many James Cameron movies in my formative years, right? So I've got a healthy skepticism. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I don't know. How do you guys feel?
So we've talked about building relationships and getting to know your colleagues in a kind of in a more human, deeper fashion, getting to know your teams, being savvier about the way we talk to each other and about the way that we interact. And I think the more we do that, the smarter we're going to be about how we bring AI into our ecosystem. It's already here. We're using AI every single day, all the time, 24/7, whether we know it or not. And I don't think that it's going to take over the world if we continue to treat each other with respect and with kindness and with transparency. I think AI can help us get to a better place in terms of how we operate with each other. And I'm pretty excited about it. I watched a lot of those movies and have a lot of those same fears around, you know, what AI could be and taking it to that dark place. But I'd rather stay on the positive side of things and believe that with good people in charge and with, you know, with a lot of research, a lot of homework, and a lot of vulnerability and willing to like test and learn and fail and change, that I think AI is going to have a great place in our future.
Yeah. I don't see it as any different than any other technological age that we've been through. And we're on the front end of it right now. And it just feels different. I mean, obviously we weren't alive when the industrial age started, so we can't really relate specifically to that. But, you know, we were alive when the internet, I remember when the internet, literally, I was using the internet without the World Wide Web sitting on top of it. So, you know, you're having to ask questions through like something called Veronica. And it was just very, very bizarre. And I remember lots of people thinking their jobs were going to go away because of the internet. So I think, you know, we need to get a little farther along in this process. I also think from a change perspective, not to get too tactical, but just the basic nudging and knowing where people are and they're starting to move away. Like if somebody would have been nudging me like, nope, go back and get your workout done in the morning, like
Yeah.
that might have helped me stay on that course.
Yeah.
And
You know,
everything we do is online now. So it's not like they don't know where we are, right? Where we are with things. Like, you know, that to me is going to be one of the very small, subtle things that to me helps change.
yeah. And we're already using tools like that.
Yeah.
In small ways and in big ways. And you know, one of the things that I get really excited about is the use of technology in leadership and in culture building and in coaching. And there are some great products out there right now that are on the leading edge of that we've been playing around with and have had some great results with. So it's not something we want to depend on to replace our human coaching and our performance coaching and communications with our team members, but it's certainly a nice tool to have in the toolkit.
Yeah. So Marc, this has been a really interesting conversation. A lot of things we've talked about today, but is there, as you reflect on the things that we have talked about, and especially from a change leadership perspective, is there one thing you might want to leave the audience with today that sort of would help project them to the next level? How do I think about this differently? How do I get it into my, lexicon, or, start to focus on the skill for myself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, to me, I go back to I've been more blessed than I deserve to have great leaders. And the ones who move the needle the most in their business, and another benchmark of success is what happened to the people who worked with you and on your team, and what have they gone on to do. The leaders that were successful by both of those measures were the ones that truly just invested of themselves in their teams, right? Like, I think we've probably all been part of organizations, and we don't have to name names. That was at HR Tech when we were at the bar and we talked about such things. But, I think we've all worked for organizations where that wasn't the case, right? Where there was a leader in place that kind of pontificated from on high and projected confidence, whether it was there or not. And every move they made was like taken down from the heavens. And then there's the folks that will just have these conversations and be authentic. And you've both talked about this during this session, is have those really candid moments with your teams where, hey, I'm not 1,000% certain on where this is going to go next, but boy, I'd love your input on it. Or here's what I'm thinking of doing. Here's where I think we should go. Let's get your input. And don't just ask the question, like, listen, internalize, develop a relationship with your teams, because good times, bad times, when you need to rely on them and then they need to rely on you to get you through to the other side of it,
when you have those bonds already in place, it just makes everything else so much easier. And you can also kind of revel in their successes too, right? I've had people that have found tremendous opportunities elsewhere and have left my team, and it goes from, oh my God, how are you abandoning us, to, man, I am so proud of you, that's outstanding, like, let's keep in touch. And it's amazing how, like, I'm old enough that I've been through cycles where, like, we end up working again together down the road, and just kind of having those bonds in place. There's no way, there's no easy button, but investing the time necessary, I think, makes everything better.
Susan, what about you? Last thoughts?
Marc put a really fine point on everything, that the importance of relationships and building real connections can't be emphasized too much. So I just leave it there.
Well, as we close out, do you want to do a little quick promo for the cohort that might help people to think about this?
I'd love to. We are starting a change leadership cohort in January of 2025. I think our first session is on January the 22nd. It'll go for 8 weeks. And we'll be covering topics such as how you become a great change leader and maybe even a change catalyst, leading your teams, having an impact on your organization, considering the impact of culture on change leadership, getting really down into some details around how we figure out who our stakeholders are and how we lead them through change, and putting that all together into an overall change strategy. So 90-minute sessions every week for 8 weeks, working with colleagues from across the nation, across the world. And I'll be leading that along with our change catalyst, leadership catalyst from the Lathos organization.
I'm excited. A few more just quick promos. The annual HR Systems Survey Report is out and, available, as well as some of the individual segment reports. So go to the website, check it out. Also, be sure to listen to Stacy and Cliff next week while they spill the tea on HR tech. Thanks, Marc and Susan, for joining me today. I also want to thank our producers, Brand Method Media Group, led by Kelly, our marketing team, Summer, shout out to Summer, and thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate it. That's all the time we have for this episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, drop us a line, let us know what topics you want to hear about. We definitely want to be talking about the things that you care about and that are important to you. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.